This white crystal in your kitchen killed an estimated 12 million human beings before it ever touched your coffee. For 4 centuries, sugar was worth its weight in gold, and every ounce was paid for in chained hands. Picture cane fields lit like a battlefield at night, torches moving slowly between the endless tropical rows. The overseers counted human bodies the way merchants once counted coins, ledger by heavy ledger, year by year. This is the story of the sweetest substance on earth and the darkest ledger ever kept in its name. But here is the thing, sugar should not even exist in your kitchen, not at this price, not in this quantity, not without a warning. Sugarcane is not a spice, it is something far stranger. It is a giant tropical grass, taller than a man, thick as a wrist, filled with sweet sap. Early humans chewed the raw cane and thought they had stumbled upon an impossible miracle from the earth. The sweetness comes from sucrose, a molecule your tongue is hardwired to crave from the moment of birth. Because in the natural world, sweetness usually meant ripeness, meant safety, meant calories, meant survival for another day. Your body was built to hunt this taste. For most of human history, that hunt ended at honey. A wild hive, a smoked log, a few dripping combs guarded by furious stinging clouds of angry bees. That was the absolute ceiling of sweetness for almost every civilization on Earth for thousands of years. Medieval Europe knew nothing else. No candy, no cake as we understand it, no spoonful in the morning cup. Just honey, wild fruit, and the fading memory of both through a long, grey and hungry European winter. For centuries, sweetness was a seasonal luxury, never a daily habit, never a spoonful in every warm cup. And yet, in humid valleys most Europeans could not even place on a map, farmers were quietly working miracles. They had already learned to grow sunlight in solid form. They had learned to crystallize the sun itself. The first bite of sugar happened far from Europe, in green valleys of running water and fire. Thousands of years ago, on the humid island of New Guinea, ancient people began to domesticate a wild reed. They chewed the stalk, planted the strongest shoots, and generation by generation they patiently bred a sweeter plant. That reed traveled. It crossed the Pacific in outrigger canoes, reaching the Philippines, Indonesia, and coastal mainland Asia. It found its true laboratory in ancient India, where Sanskrit finally gave the crystal its first written name: Sharkara, grit, gravel, crystal grain. From that word came Persian shakar, Arabic sukar, Latin saccharum, English sugar. Every language on the trade route still carries a fossil of that single Indian syllable in its dictionary today. Around 500 BCE, Indian chemists finally solved the puzzle that had quietly defeated every other civilization before them. They learned to boil the cane juice, skim it, cool it, and separate pale crystals from dark molasses. They had invented refined sugar. Buddhist monks carried the sacred technique east into China and west toward Persia. Recipes moved with sermons. Trade followed prayer. The crystal began its long, quiet march across the known world. Then Persian armies rode east into India and discovered the strange, silent reed that seemed to bleed honey. Persian soldiers marching the Indus Valley rode home in astonishment. A reed that gives honey without bees. Persian and later Arab agronomists took the plant seriously. They perfected irrigation and designed the first true sugar mills. Powered by oxen, by water, later by wind, refineries rose in Baghdad, Damascus and Cairo, boiling syrup in copper pans. They cast the finished product into hard white cones called loaves, treasures worth their weight in gold. In the Islamic gardens of Andalusia, cane grew beside oranges and pomegranates, a strange sweet reed from the east. When crusaders stumbled into the Levantine cities, they tasted something no European tongue had ever known before: a sweetness clean and sharp without honey's weight. They called it sweet salt and rode home demanding it. Venice, always watching, always calculating, saw the opportunity first and seized the sugar trade of the Eastern Mediterranean. Venetian merchants became Europe's first sugar cartel, moving loaves north into the courts of France, England, and Germany. Doctors prescribed it, apothecaries locked it with their most precious drugs. A sick king was dosed with sugared wine. Sugar became medicine, dowry, royal gift, wedding centerpiece, an edible sculpture that dominated the banquet tables of kings. A sugar sculpture might rise from the banquet, shaped like a castle, a lion, or a ship at sea. To possess loaf sugar was to advertise wealth. It was, quite literally, the currency of aristocrats and kings. And for centuries, the price kept it far from ordinary hands. Then, a Portuguese caravel changed the entire economy. In the 15th century, Portuguese sailors pushed south along the African coast, then far out into the empty Atlantic. They found volcanic islands, Madeira, the Azores, later São Tomé of the equator, forested and utterly uninhabited. Warm, wet, forested, uninhabited, and crucially ideal for cane. Prince Henry the Navigator dispatched settlers carrying cane cuttings. By the 1450s, Madeira was producing sugar in quantities Europe had never before seen. But sugar is not wheat. You cannot sow it in April and simply forget it. Cane demands brutal, unending, back-breaking labor. The fields must be cleared by fire and axe. Stalks are cut by hand, close to the ground. In air thick as soup, the cut cane must reach the mill within hours before the sap sours. The mill crushes day and night. The boiling house runs day and night, fires roaring, syrup constantly steaming. Workers skim syrup beside massive copper cauldrons that can cripple or kill a man with a single splash. There is no rest during harvest, and there is absolutely no gentle version of this brutal, killing work. And here is the thing. Europeans quickly ran out of workers willing to die for another man's fortune. Contracted laborers fled the fields. Convicts perished quickly. The indigenous islanders of the Canaries were worked into extinction. So plantation owners turned their eyes to the African coast that Portuguese ships now visited every single season. On São Tomé in the 1400s, the pattern was set for centuries of horror to follow. African men, women and children were purchased, shipped across water, and burned into the cane fields forever. The plantation as an industrial death factory was truly born on that little equatorial island of Africa. Little did they know, this brutal prototype would soon devour whole continents and rewrite the Atlantic world. Sugar, not gold, not silver, not tobacco. Sugar birthed the terrible Middle Passage across the ocean. Sugar was the hidden engine of the entire Atlantic system, and the Caribbean would soon become a death factory. When Christopher Columbus sailed on his second voyage in 1493, he carried cane cuttings from the Canary Islands. He planted them on Hispaniola. The plant loved the Caribbean. The Caribbean would come to hate the plant. Within 100 years, the Spanish, Portuguese, Dutch, English and French transformed the islands into a green machine. Barbados, colonized by the English in the 1620s, was almost pure forest. By 1650, almost pure cane. Jamaica followed. Saint-Domingue, the French half of Hispaniola, became the most profitable colony in European empire's history. On the eve of the 1790s, that small colony produced 40% of the Western world's sugar and more than half of its coffee. It was an economic supernova. And it ran on human beings. The triangular trade took shape and hardened into iron. From European ports, Bristol, Nantes, Liverpool and Amsterdam, ships sailed south loaded with guns, gunpowder, iron bars, textiles, brandy and cheap trinkets for the coast. In African fortresses like Elmina and Cape Coast Castle, goods were exchanged for captives sold by coastal kingdoms. Kidnapped inland or taken in wars deliberately provoked by the trade itself, then chained below the ship's decks. Carried west across the Atlantic in the crossing men still called the Middle Passage, a floating grave. Roughly 12.5 million Africans were forced onto those ships across 4 brutal centuries of trade. Nearly 2 million never reached the far shore. Survivors were sold in Caribbean ports, branded, driven into cane. In the islands, the ships were reloaded with sugar, molasses and rum and turned back toward Europe again. Guns went south, people went west. Sweetness went east. And the ledgers balanced in bright, careful merchant ink. From merchant houses that still have marble headquarters standing today. Britain discovered something equally intoxicating, the sugar tax. Duties on Caribbean sugar and West Indian rum poured into the royal treasury. That money built more ships. Those ships built an empire. The Royal Navy for a critical century was financed by the taste in tea. Life expectancy for an enslaved worker on a Caribbean sugar plantation, once broken to the field, was 7 years. 7. Owners did the math coldly. It was cheaper to work a human being to death and buy another than to feed one well and let them live. Meanwhile, sugar barons in London, Bordeaux and Bristol built palaces. They bought parliaments, they financed universities, they dined off silver and posed for oil portraits in fine silk. They were wealthier than kings. Then the enslaved lit a fire the great empires simply could not extinguish. August 22, 1791. On the northern plain of Saint-Domingue, a secret ceremony gathered at Bois Caïman. Within days, the cane fields of the richest colony on earth were burning from horizon to horizon. The Haitian Revolution had begun, 13 years long, the only slave uprising in history, ending in an independent nation. Out of that fire rose Toussaint Louverture, born enslaved, self-taught, brilliant, patient and terrifying to his enemies. He built an army of freed people that defeated French colonists, Spanish invaders, British invaders, and Napoleon's own veterans. Napoleon sent tens of thousands of veterans across the Atlantic. Yellow fever and Haitian musket fire buried them all. In 1804, Haiti declared independence, the first free black republic in the world, born directly from cane. Napoleon, humiliated and cash-strapped, cut off from Caribbean sugar by British blockade, made a desperate bet on European soil. He poured resources into a strange new crop, the sugar beet, a pale root yielding crystal in temperate fields. His chemists refined the process, his decrees planted thousands of hectares, and to everyone's astonishment, it actually worked. For the first time in history, Europe could grow its own sugar without depending on the distant tropics. Meanwhile, in Britain, abolitionist campaigners weaponized the sugar bowl itself. They printed pamphlets, they organized household boycotts. Hundreds of thousands of British households simply stopped buying West Indian sugar, quietly refusing the crystal at their tables. Women passed silver sugar tongs across drawing rooms and quietly said, "No thank you, this crystal is slave-grown." Slowly, painfully, the political tide turned. Britain abolished the slave trade in 1807. Slavery itself, 1833. France, after reversing itself under Napoleon, finally abolished slavery again in 1848, decades after its first attempt. The United States, whose cotton South hungered for the crystal's cousin, held out until 1865 and Civil War. Yet the crystal survived. It quietly conquered your pantry, sitting today on your counter in a small ceramic bowl. Because as slavery ended in one place, sugar production simply moved and industrialized in another far corner. Cuba, still Spanish, became the largest sugar producer on earth, worked first by enslaved Africans on brutal estates. Later, indentured Chinese laborers were shipped across another ocean under conditions almost entirely indistinguishable from outright slavery. British planters, after abolition, imported millions of indentured workers from India to Trinidad, Guyana, Fiji, Mauritius, and Natal. New chains, new contracts, same cane. In Europe, steam-powered refineries replaced older mills of wood and wind. Beet sugar exploded across France, Germany, Russia, and eventually reached the American Midwest with astonishing industrial force. Chemists learned to extract the last gram of sucrose from every stalk and every root. The price collapsed. In 1700, the average English person consumed about 4 pounds of sugar in one entire year. By 1800, about 18 pounds. By 1900, close to 90 pounds consumed every single year. Today, in many wealthy countries, the average adult consumes well over 100 pounds per year now. Most of that sugar is invisible, hidden inside food they never think of as sweet at all. Believe it or not, added sugar now appears in roughly 74% of packaged foods sold today. It is in your bread, your pasta sauce, your salad dressing, your yogurt marketed as perfectly healthy, your baby formula, your medicine. The crystal, once a royal gift, is now a background hum everywhere. The body that evolved to hunt sweetness has no defense against a world that supplies it endlessly. Rates of type 2 diabetes have exploded across every continent that has adopted the modern Western diet fully. Childhood obesity in one generation has become a public health emergency in countries that never suffered it before. Heart disease, fatty liver, tooth decay, and metabolic collapse, the modern epidemics of an over-sweetened human world. Some historians and doctors now speak of a modern plantation, not on an island, but inside our own arteries. The industry, throughout the 20th century, fought back with all the elegance of an old imperial empire. Internal documents later uncovered show how the sugar lobby in the 1960s quietly funded prestigious nutrition scientists. They shifted the blame for heart disease onto dietary fat, protecting sugar's clean reputation for many decades. For decades, the world was told that butter was the villain and sugar was completely and entirely innocent. Big Sugar rewrote nutrition science the way the East India Company once rewrote global trade law itself. Every spoonful you stir into your morning cup carries 4 centuries of blood, ledgers, and quiet lobbying. And the next crystal waiting on your shelf, believe me, has an even darker story to tell. So let us stand back and look at what we have. Sweetness is civilization's oldest and most enduring addiction. We chased it out of caves, into gardens, across oceans, and finally into the laboratories of the modern world. Empires rise where cravings meet coercion, where a substance is craved and other humans are forced to produce it. That equation built the Sugar Islands. It built the cotton south of America. It built the world you know. The history of sugar is not a footnote to slavery. It is very nearly the same tragic book. Written in cane, in ledger, in chain, one continuous chapter written across 4 brutal, profitable centuries of trade. Every port with a curved harbor and white townhouses, Bristol, Nantes, Bordeaux, Lisbon, Amsterdam, Copenhagen, remembers this. Each carries the memory of that trade quietly, embedded in the very stones of its wealthy, beautiful old streets. Every European recipe for jam, marmalade, marzipan, chocolate truffle, and tea with 2 lamps is a late chapter. And you, reading this or hearing this today, are the heir of that ledger, not guilty of it personally, not responsible for what happened before you were born, but heir to it in the food that you eat. Heir in the streets you walk, the wealth some nations inherited, and the wounds that others still carry. To know where sugar came from is not to feel bad about a spoonful stirred into your morning coffee. It is to see with clear eyes how quiet domestic kitchen things can hide the loudest history on earth. The crystal on your table is not innocent, it never was. But now, at last, it stands revealed. One more product tells this story even louder. And next, we open that final, unmistakable chapter together. Next week, another small, unassuming thing. A wrinkled blackberry that once cost more than gold by weight. It redrew the map of the world, launched fleets, toppled kingdoms, and pulled Europe out of the Middle Ages. The spice that made the age of exploration inevitable. Pepper, believe it or not, this changed everything. If this changed how you see sugar, imagine what pepper will do to your understanding of history. Subscribe for weekly videos about the incredible hidden history of the food sitting on your table. Hit the bell so the next chapter finds you. Hit